This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.
So, Mick Bunting, how you doing?
Hello, Paul. Nice to see you after all these years.
After all these years, yeah. Well, I've got to say you're the smartest dressed guest that we've had on yet.
I do try.
I know you're not wearing it for us, but certainly, yeah, you're looking the part. So, yeah, I mean, it's great to have you on. We've obviously not spoken for, God, nearly 20 years.
Pushing 20 years, yeah.
And I'll just give a little bit of background just so people understand. So we met, you were one of the course instructors when I became a personal trainer. You were the sports massage instructor on that course.
Yeah.
And that's how we met. You've got a pretty intense story. I knew a bit of your story, but I've just finished your book, which is excellent.
Thank you.
And I'll certainly recommend anyone that's listening to this to get it and have a read. But obviously, we'll sort of cover some of it in this. But yeah, so that's how we met. You were the instructor on the course. I became a personal trainer. I did that for years before I sort of moved out to Australia. That your book was you were getting to sort of the end of the writing process and wanting to get it published, and you were struggling to come up with a title for it. And then I gave you the title, which was A Fair Cop. And yeah, that's the sort of connection that we've got. So I guess, I mean, this podcast is called When I Grow Up, and usually when I'm talking to people, it's like, what did a lot of people have had unusual careers like me. That's why the podcast started, is because I've had such an unusual path to get to where I'm at. And then a lot of people that I've met along the way have been the same. But reading your book, you always knew what you wanted to be when you grew up, didn't you?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, that's right, Paul. I'm actually just finishing book 2 on the basis of a lot of people that have emailed me over the years saying, why haven't you appealed the conviction? But in answer to your question, in that book, I write a little bit about the history as to why I wanted to become a police officer. And I remember that was probably at the age of about 4 or 5 years old. My dad was a bobby, and he was working as he did most Christmas days. He was at work on this particular Christmas day, and Mum, if she got wind that he was able to come home for 10 minutes on the morning, she'd make us, my sister and I, wait to open our presents that Santa Claus had brought. Right. And I just remember, obviously, as an eager child with a boatload of presents in front of me, wanting to open them and having to sit and wait for my dad. And we lived at the top of quite a long cul-de-sac back then. And I just remember sitting on the chair at the window, like waiting for my dad to come home. And then I saw this white car with a big yellow stripe down it with a massive array of blue lights on the top of it. And I was absolutely fascinated. I just couldn't quite take in what it was. I thought, what's this? And then when it came up our drive and my dad stepped out in this uniform and with a radio sticking out of his pocket, as they used to do in those days, and then he started talking I was absolutely fascinated. And it was from that moment that there was no doubt in my mind what I wanted to do. I didn't even really understand what it was, and I just liked the look of it all. But yeah, I mean, it just looked great. And then obviously as you grow up and grow older, you then realise what the job is and what the job was matched the visual representation of it for me. And that was all. That was absolutely all I ever wanted to do. That was it. There was nothing else ever from being a kid for me, and that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. So you were in your early. Well, I mean, that's all you did, didn't you? You left school and then went into. Yeah. You must have been in your early 20s when you.
19 when I joined.
19, right? Yeah. And then obviously everything went pretty well for a few years. You were getting commendations for.
It was really good, Paul. the work was great. I was really keen, obviously. Academically, my brain was still very active because I'd just come out of school. I had a private education at Batley Grammar School, so I was fortunate in that respect. And after my 2 years probation, the chief superintendent had me in and said, basically, you want to get your head down, do your exams, and you've got an opportunity to get quite high up in the police force. So I went away and started studying for my sergeant's exam at probably 2021. So really young, not really intending to get promoted at that age. It's too young to be a sergeant, but to at least get the exams and the qualifications under my belt. And throughout that period of studying and taking the exams, doing various jobs that attracted senior officers' attention, got several commendations, as you say, for various arrests that I made, and one in an extremely violent arrest where I was quite seriously assaulted with a crowbar from a guy that was doing a burglary at a local petrol station store. And the comments made by the senior officer was that not only did you make an arrest, this guy was wanted all over the country for various offences, serious offender. But in the face of extreme violence, the restraint that I'd shown. So and I think that for me was always how I acted, and with firm but fair with people who were being arrested. I was always fair with them. But yeah, so my career really was looking good. I'd just been accepted onto a AFO course, which is Authorised Firearms Officer. So again, my looking at getting promoted was looking really good. The exams were being done. I've been accepted onto the firearms course. I was getting commendations. I was in my early 20s. Life was great.
That story you've just said with the crowbar, that's not even in the book, is it?
My original manuscript was 156,000 words, and it ended up being 90,000. So publishers chop a lot out. They obviously know what they're doing in terms of out. So I did write about it, but yeah, it was the editing process. The publishers will bring the book to a size that they think will sell. So you end up with big chunks of it being taken out.
Right. Yeah. So then, I guess if we get to the point where what the book's all about, really, is there was a altercation, would you say? Like you were you arresting that guy or just trying to detain him? I'm just trying to remember from.
Yeah. So I'll run through it very quickly, Paul. We were called. So it's 24th of August 1997. It's 5 to midnight. So I'm obviously on nights. We'd been to my partner and I. We went to the LGI, Leeds General Infirmary Hospital, to pick up a colleague who was taking a statement from a member of staff at the hospital who'd been assaulted the night before when we'd been on duty, because the guy that had assaulted her, we'd locked him up, and we needed to get the statements together. So this Bobby called up on the radio to say, I've finished my statement, because somebody come and pick me up. So myself and my partner, I was around. So I went to the hospital, and just as I'd picked him up, this call came in to Harold Terrace in Burley, Leeds. And it was basically, the operator said over the radio, she sent another unit, ironically, to it. And it was, the call was a 3-9s call. It was a female from a residential address, screaming down the phone, basically saying that these guys are trying to kill me. I need the police. So it was obviously graded as an immediate call that you've got just a matter of minutes to get to in terms of the targets. Now, because I was near there, and I knew the guy that had been sent to it was actually doing some clerical duties in the police station. He was further away, so I volunteered to go. I said, "Look, I'm nearby. There's 3 of us in the car. We'll just go along." And so I put the blues and twos on, and we made our way there. And I was there within about a minute and a half, so not far at all. And when I pulled up, I was driving the car. When I pulled up, I kind of abandoned the car in the middle of the street, because the door of this address flew open, and 2 guys legged it. Now, bearing in mind the information we've got at this time is that there's a woman in distress. We'd been told whilst en route to expedite because she was screaming more and more to the operator. So the operator was saying, can you get there quick? This woman's in trouble. Yeah. And then when we got there, we see two lads run from the scene. So we're thinking, well, I can't say what the others were thinking, but I can tell you what I was thinking. Has this woman been murdered or raped, or what are we going to find in the house? But your natural instinct is to run after the people that are running away. So all three of us did just that. Now, these were in the day, this was in 1997, at the point where the police in the UK had just started to be routinely issued with stab vests. But it was unlike now where it's compulsory to wear them. Back then, it was issued to you and it was your choice whether you wore it. And I always had mine with me, but I didn't put it on unless I thought I really needed it. And in this particular instance, it was August. It was a warm summer's evening. I didn't have mine on, but the other two bobbies did. So I was able to run. And back then, of course, I was fitter and faster. So I was than I am now. So I caught up with one of the guys pretty quickly, and I got hold of him. And he became verbally aggressive, though not violent at this time. And he started remonstrating with me, effing and jeffing, what you doing? You can't do this to me. I said, look, you're not under arrest, but what I do need to do is go back to the address to check out what's happened. And until that point, I'd like you to come with me. It's a bit of a fine line for an officer because you can't make somebody do something unless you arrest them. Right. And at that point, I'd not arrested him, and I didn't intend to until I'd established what had gone on at the house. But fortunately, although he was aggressive and he was reasonably compliant in terms of he'd come back to me, he was not happy about it, and it was you could see it escalating. He was heavily in drink, his pupils were dilated, and in those days, LSD, which is was the drug of choice, which made people extremely volatile. I formed the view that based on his behaviours, I knew he'd been drinking because I could smell it, and I formed the view that he'd also been on some kind of drugs as well. Anyway, I walked him back to the house. Fortunately, my colleagues had caught up with the other guy, and we're now doing exactly the same. And when we all got back to the house, the other guy, not the guy I was with, ran into the house and started remonstrating with this lady who was in a bit of a heap on the floor. So she was alive, firstly, but he ran straight in and started again. So he was immediately arrested by the other two officers and put to the floor, handcuffed. There was a violent struggle, but a relatively routine arrest, and he was cuffed and taken out. I stood at the door of the house with my fella, and he became increasingly irate at the fact that his mate had been arrested. Yeah. And I sort of put my arm up straight to say, get back, keep away from the door, as my colleagues were bringing the other guy out and putting him into the car under arrest. The guy I was with continued to be verbally aggressive, and he was now barging into me and trying to get into the house. And at that point, I'd made the decision that he was going to be arrested, but I didn't want to tell him that until the other guy was secured in the vehicle. So I knew I had some help because it was becoming a volatile situation. People from the street, from the local houses, it was a notoriously anti-police area. Yeah. We're starting to come out. There's a police car abandoning the road. There was a fracas going on. There's people shouting, and now people are coming out to join in. So it's now becoming a dangerous situation. Yeah. So I've got this guy palming him away as he sort of walks into me. I turn my head to the side to check that my colleagues were okay and getting the other prisoner into the van. Into the car, and I just momentarily just blacked out. I didn't feel anything, but everything just went black, and I just heard this ringing sensation in my ears, and it was within a second or two that I realised it hit me, and it hit me really hard on the chin. So it was I would say the perfect punch because, as I said earlier, at that stage in my life, early 20s. Going to, as you know, from back in the day, Paul went to the gym every day, fit as a fiddle, and was able to, in the unlikely and unfortunate event of becoming immersed in one of these situations, would be able to help myself. But in this particular case, no, he'd caught me out, and then he pulled me over, sort of at my collar and tie, and pulled me down. So I was bent over at the waist at 90 degrees, facing the floor, and then with the other hand, just started launching punches into my head and face. And it was at that point, and they were fast and furious punches, and delivered with a high degree of force. And it became obvious to me at that point that the first blow had rendered me pretty helpless, and that I was going to struggle to get out of this one. And that's where it all began. The struggle began.
And then, so at the back end of that is when you made the, well, not fatal error, but almost fatal. Well, I mean, I don't even know. You wouldn't even say it's an error. I mean, it's just something that you kind of like kicked him away.
Yeah. So what happened then was he continued to punch me. I felt like a salty taste and a gritty sensation in my mouth. And what I later found out was that was one of my teeth had broken up.
Right.
And then I remembered, so I spat out to get that out of my mouth. I'm still face down at this stage, so spat down onto the floor. And I just remember a pair of dark trousers standing next to him. So I thought, well, that's a police officer, so that's good news. But for all her efforts, it was a female officer, and female officers do a fantastic job. This is not me making any comment. This was, and I don't think I should really have mentioned a gender, but to suffice to say, she was a small framed lady and didn't have the physical strength, as I didn't, to deal with this individual. So she started hitting him with a side handle baton, but she was hitting him on the legs. And that really didn't have any effect other than to anger him more. So as she hit him, he hit me harder because he was getting angry that she was trying to restrain him. Right. So she then escalated the force to another level and tried to spray him with CS gas, which, again, at that stage in 97, we'd only just been issued with it in the UK. So it was a very new thing. And the nozzle in the canister had spun round a little bit. Not the officer's fault. This is a design fault. So when she sprayed it, it went straight in my face. So it's hilarious. I mean,
I shouldn't laugh.
If it hadn't have devastated my life so much, this would be hilarious. And one day, I think probably on my deathbed, I'll look back and think that is quite funny. But at the moment, I struggle to laugh. But every time I say this in all the talks that I did, the audience laugh at this point because it is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just imagining it on a TV show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Bloody ridiculous. But she sprayed it, and that went. So at this point, I've probably had about, I would say, a dozen punches to the head, quite seriously. The first one was the one that rendered me concussed. I've now can't see because I've got CS gas in my eyes, and I'm choking and struggling to breathe. So it's now getting to a point where I think, well, I've tried to punch him, not successfully. He's been whacked with a side handle baton. That's made him worse. He's been sprayed in the face with CS gas. That's not dealt with him. And I'm getting weaker, and I'm starting to black out, and I can't breathe. So it's time I need to really sort this guy out. The use of force continuum is made out there, and it's time to really say, if in those days we'd have routinely carried tasers, someone would have got tasered. Someone would have tasered him at this point, but we didn't. It was a street fight with this, so I had to deal with him in that way. So I managed to break free by pulling back, but that meant that my shirt was ripped. All the buttons came off. The shirt ripped because he wouldn't let go of me. But I managed to get away. And then I just saw him in front of me through the blurred vision, the concussion, the frightened, concussed, and difficult state that I was in. I saw him in front of me on like in a kneeled up position on one foot and one knee, almost like a sprinter getting into the blocks, if you like. So he wasn't on the floor in a position where this was done. It was on the floor where he could launch me again, and it showed no signs of stopping. So at that point, I kicked him to try and kick him backwards so that he'd go flying onto his back. And I did that, and then as soon as I did that, other Bobby, because one of the other officers had pressed the panic button on my behalf, other officers from the surrounding area had arrived, and they all dived on top of him, and he was then subdued and arrested, and handcuffed and put in the back of the van. And then he went to the cell area with another unit that had arrived to back us up. And then I sort of collected myself. I then had the crowd to deal with, because the crowd then came up to me. I was obviously bleeding. My shirt was off. I was in a bit of a state, really. Not really fully with it because of all the punches that I'd had to the head. And then people started coming up to me and they were prodding me. And so we've got your effing number, as in collar number, on the top of your epaulets, as if to say, we've seen you kick him, you're in trouble, we're gonna report you for what you've done. So the whole crowd that were there, who were anti-police, that they were never going to do me any favours, were at me straight away. So I just said to my mate, just let's get out of here. So got into a police car and shot off, and that was it.
So yeah, I'm trying to remember from the book what actually happened to him. Did he get prosecuted or?
So yeah, that's exactly what happened. So he got put in the cells, and because he was too drunk to interview, he was put in a cell to sober up. And then the following day, officers interviewed him about the offences that he'd committed. The irony was that the reason that the lady had called was because the two guys that had run away from the house, they even though they were friends, they'd been fighting all afternoon because they'd been out drinking all day. The fight was between them. She tried to intervene, and then they turned on her. So they'd been violent with each other for that afternoon, and that had escalated. But he got interviewed, and in the interview he actually said, "I would like to apologise because there was an officer last night that, in his words, got it, and I'd like to say sorry. I was drunk and I shouldn't have done it." So he was, to his credit, he'd sobered up and apologised for what he'd done. He was charged with various public order offences. He was charged with the assault on me, and subsequently, further down the line, he was convicted of those offences. So yeah, he was prosecuted.
And what happened to him?
He got a community service order, so painting fences and picking up litter. That's how they treated that's how the system treated the police in the UK in those days. They treated us with utter contempt. That I'd been through all that, and the injuries that I'd sustained, and the punishment that an offender gets for that is picking up litter. Yeah. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. Our country ought to be ashamed of itself.
For a few things, but yeah, that is for sure. But it's like, how do they expect people to want to be a copper?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the narrative that they would and did put on it is that we accept that he did wrong to you. You lost your temper. You shouldn't have done what you did. That's the narrative. So the narrative that the press put on it, the narrative that the police spokesperson would put on it, is that a thorough investigation took place. This officer went through a judicial process. This officer was, found to have done something wrong. But that wasn't the case in my case. And I think all these years on, Paul, I would say it's now 2025, nearly 30 years since this happened. It was common assault. So it's a very low level minor offence that now no longer shows on my record. I'm in a very good job, and life is rebuilt. If I was guilty of that offence all those years ago, I would say, do you know what? I was a young guy. I lost my temper. I did something wrong. And the reason I continue to fight this and continue to tell my story is because none of that applies. This was a violent offender known to the police who unleashed a violent, sustained attack on a non-duty police officer, and he was restrained using minimal force. He got no injuries. He was completely uninjured, and they see fit to prosecute me for that. It's outrageous. It can never be justified, but yet the judiciary continues to justify it.
So the if I've got this right, the female cop that was with you on the night, she turned against you, is that right?
Yeah, she turned against me. She pulled me into the office, She was a sergeant, one of the officers that came to back up. And she said, this was an hour or two afterwards. So I was back at the police station and getting sorted out and whatnot. And she's pulled me into the office and says, Mick, you can't put in your pocket notebook that you've kicked him. Make sure that you don't put that. And what you put in your pocket notebook is a very private thing. It's your evidence and you tell the truth. It goes without saying. And I said to her, Sergeant, I think what you're saying is inappropriate. I will be giving a full account of the facts of what I've done. I have no reason to hide that I've kicked him. It was self-defense.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that I didn't mean anything. I didn't mean to offend her. I didn't mean to undermine her authority, although she doesn't have any authority to tell me what my evidence is. But I wanted just to make it clear that there's absolutely no problem with me saying what's happened, because what happened was completely lawful. Yeah. What you trained, and so I gave a full account. I've always been completely truthful. I kicked him because he needed to be kicked. There's nothing wrong with saying that. And people shout, "Oh, you can't say that. You can't say that." Well, you can say that, because when it's lawful force to defend yourself from an ongoing threat, as you perceive it to be, and with all the injuries that I sustained and the number of blows that I'd taken to the head, that was my honest perception. That is lawful force. But at training school, they always say, as long as you can justify the force that you've used as being reasonable, you will never have a problem in a court of law. How wrong that training is. And as a result of this, what happened to me, some police forces changed the way they instruct their officers now in their defensive tactics training. And I think one particular force, that the defensive tactics instructors actually used my book and gave my book out to officers, right, as a bit of a, actually you need to be really careful here, and to say, as long as you can justify the force, you'll be fine. That don't come into it. It's how a judicial process plays out, how the judge conducts the trial, what evidence the jury hears and doesn't hear. If it doesn't hear all the evidence and the full context, and if it isn't properly directed by a judge that's impartial and objective, then anything can happen. And that's what happened to me.
But I mean, that judge, what, like, his deal, like, he just seems like such a dick.
Well, he I mean, I shouldn't say this, and perhaps
let me say it. I can say it. I'm in Australia.
you can say it. So I'll choose not to disagree with you. Let's say that. I've got a lot of views about the judge. What he did in the trial. The prosecuting barrister, I was charged with actual bodily harm, which is a level above common assault. To give, I don't know whether that's an offence in Australia, but just to give your listeners an idea of what actual bodily harm is. Actual bodily harm is where you've, as it says, created some kind of actual bodily harm, such as a bust lip, a broken nose, perhaps a black eye, some kind of significant injury, but not grievous bodily harm, which would be
so like what he done to you.
Yeah, well, he was charged with a separate offence called assault police. That is a separate offence in its own right. So the injuries don't really come into that. But I certainly had at least actual bodily harm. The next one up is grievous bodily harm, where it's, where a knife might be used, where you've got potentially life-threatening injuries and it's serious bodily harm, fractured skull or whatever it might be. Actual bodily harm is one below that, and then common assault is where there's no injuries at all, but you might slap someone around the face, cause no injuries, but obviously that's an assault, battery. So they charged me with actual bodily harm, but as I said earlier, Paul, this guy didn't have any injuries. So the prosecutor, this was 2 years on now. So from the incident to me getting into court was 2 years. So I had a 2-year wait, but which was obviously quite traumatic. And the prosecuting barrister in the warm up before the judge came out, as everyone were finding the places, I was put in the dock, and he walked past me and he winked at me and he said, "Don't worry, lad," which to him I still was, because I was in my early 20s and he was a guy probably in his sort of my age now, in his 50s. So, "Don't worry, lad, it's going to get sorted." And that was the prosecuting barrister. So I thought, that's odd. And his opening submissions to the judge were, this defendant is charged with actual bodily harm. The complainant, as the aggressor now was being labelled, which again irked me because he was no complainant, he was the offender. But the prosecuting barrister said there is no actual bodily harm, so we can't prove this case on the basis alone that there is no actual bodily harm. You've got to set out your case and prove it.
Yeah.
To prove an actual bodily harm, you've got to prove that there's an assault, and you've got to prove that there's actual bodily harm.
Yeah.
So on that alone, he said that anyway. The judge said, "Well, you're going to pursue it anyway because I'm telling you to. And if I decide partway through the trial to amend the indictment and charge him with common assault and add it to the indictment, then I will." And as the trial went on, so I'd gone from a moment of great relief where I looked across to my dad, who was in the public area, and kind of smiled as if to say, I think it's done, it's over, it's finally over. Because I never, ever expected, even through a trial, to be convicted of anything. And my lawyers said all the way through, there is not a jury in this land will convict you of this. You will not be convicted in an English court, in a UK court. And I was really confident that if it did end up in court, as it did, I could say exactly what I've said to you on this podcast, go through what happened, tell people how I was feeling at the point that I kicked him, which was fear, needing to defend myself, fear of an imminent further attack, no evidence that the use of force up to that point had stopped him. It was clear self-defense. There wasn't a court in the land going to convict me. But the judge, once he went down this path, my barrister, when we had a adjournment, my barrister said, "This judge is against you. You're up against it here. You're swimming against the tide." And he subsequently, when all the medical evidence came out, which supported the no injuries point, the judge then said, "Right, I'm going to charge him with common assault because I can see that he ain't going to get convicted of ABH here, so I'm going to charge him with something else instead."
Right.
And the irony there is common assault is a summary only offence. And what that means is you can only be charged with common assault up to a maximum of 6 months after the incident. This is now 23 months after the incident. Right. And I'm being charged with an offence that I couldn't be. And there's legal argument around this point. There is, without going too much into the law, Section 40 of the Criminal Justice Act does allow judges to add summary offences to indictments, but my original charge for the ABH had been outside of that 6 month period. It was a year in, so I could never have been charged with common assault. So the judge was just in any which way he could trying to get me convicted. And when my barrister challenged him and said, "You can't charge him with common assault judicially, that is a breach of process," the judge actually said, "I'm not sure whether I can or I can't, but I'm going to do it. And it's for the defendant to test at the Court of Appeal if he gets convicted." And I did get convicted. And I've been trying for 30 years to get to the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal won't let me in.
Why?
They won't give me leave to appeal. So you have to apply for leave to appeal, first of all, to a single judge. That single judge will review it and say, yay or nay, you've got an appeal. And if that fails, you can go to the full court. If that fails, then your only route to get to appeal is through the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is a so-called independent body that refers potential miscarriages of justice to the Court of Appeal. The problem with the Criminal Cases Review Commission is they're under heavy fire at the moment for making a number of mistakes. There's a quite high-profile case where a guy who'd been convicted of rape, he spent 17 years in prison, and the DNA evidence was presented to the CCRC many, many years ago, and they ignored it. And very recently, I think within the last couple of years, it was that DNA evidence has now proved that this offender, that I shouldn't call him an offender, that this guy, this wrongfully convicted guy, was definitively not the person that raped this individual. And he was released, but the CCRC had made heavy weather of that, and so they're under extreme public scrutiny. There's all kind of independent reviews, but for me, that's my only route now to appeal, and continually, I've applied 3 times to the Criminal Cases Review Commission on various legal points, and they continually say, we're not referring your case to the Court of Appeal, and they give the reasons, and they will say, well, our reasons are the reasons why we're not. I will continue to say, well, I think I should have the right to an appeal, and I've been in this stalemate for almost 30 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's bananas, isn't it? But yeah, when you were saying before, like in that heat of the moment where, like, I mean, you did, like, if you're in panic mode, or like you will just do what you feel you need to do. In fact, I read a thing today. I think it's just happened recently, in Australia. I think it was over in Perth, where some 20-year-old, I think, broke into someone's house with a machete, and then the dad, the guy and his wife and his kid are in the house, and then the guy's, got into a tussle with this kid, and the kids ended up dead. But the guy, he's got, not got off, because I mean, I don't think he even, if someone breaks into your house with a machete, I think you should be able to do whatever you can to subdue them. But yes, but now this kid's family are up in arms because nothing's happening to the guy, and it's like, well, your kid broke into his house. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah, it's a complex area of law, but so there's legal argument, isn't there? There's the law, and then there's common sense. And common sense would say any reasonable, and I don't know the circumstances of this one, so I won't talk about this one, but talk generally about the point that any reasonable-minded person would say, if somebody comes into your house, forcibly breaks in against your will with a weapon, all bets are off. Yeah. All bets are off. And whilst we have to work within the law, the threshold for that householder becomes a lot lower for any conviction or prosecution, or a lot higher, should I say, a lot higher. It should be really. There was one in this country, wasn't there, years ago? The Norfolk farmer, can't remember his name.
Oh yeah.
And he shot a burglar who was in his house. Now the complication with that case was that the burglar was running down the stairs, and the householder shot him in the back. Yeah. So the argument was, well, he's running away from you, and you've shot him in the back. How can that be self-defense? So you can kind of see that there's some conversation to be had there, and that it's not always dead straightforward, and you need to know the individual circumstances. But generally speaking, if you're breaking into somebody's house and you're armed, then I've got little sympathy for what happens to you. And I think, from a legal point of view, I think there's been a law brought out in the UK, and I can't remember what the law is, but it's just been brought out, and that gives householders much more latitude to defend themselves and the property, and that it's the objective test of the subjective view. So the subjective view is, even if you judge the situation that you're in to be incorrect, provided that what you did with that misapprehension was objectively reasonable, then you've not committed an offence. And if that had applied in my case, and if people had have understood that my subjective view of this individual was that he was going to kill me, that he was going to, or at least cause me some serious damage, that therefore the objective level of force that I used, applying the objective test to my subjective view, I would have been found not guilty. But what the judge did, he steered the jury to think, well, I don't really want you to put yourself in the officer's mind. I want you to just look at what he did. Yeah. And this guy was on one knee and 1 foot. He was on the ground and he's kicked him. That can never be right. So when you put it in a sentence like that, suddenly it puts a whole different slant on it. And that's what the judge did. So as well as charging me with the offence, the common assault, he misdirected the jury. And that's ultimately what cost me my downfall. When the judge said you're going to prison, the jury gasped. They didn't realise quite what they'd done. I don't think they even realised they were going to lose my job. I think they just thought, well, it's common assault. It's a minor thing. He'll get a slap on the wrist and he'll go. Yeah. And the judge said, when you come back to this court in 5 weeks' time, you're going to prison. and the jury were really shocked by that. So they didn't. Now I don't know anybody that was in that jury, but one of my friends' wife's friends, I found out many years later, was on the jury. I don't know who this person is, but it's on good authority from the person that I've spoken to that she was. And she said in the deliberations, they were so confused by all the different offences and then the addition to the indictment that they all said, well, if we just convict him of the lesser one, that seems the fairest thing to do for everybody. And that was the extent of that was the extent of the jury's conversation. And to me, that's not good enough. That shattered my life. That ruined everything that I stood for. As I said earlier, gone through my dad was a senior police officer, gone through a private education. I then joined the police at 19. I was an upright member of the community that was trying to do the right thing for people.
Yeah.
And I've ended up a convicted criminal for my whole adult life, or a vast majority of my adult life.
Yeah, but the thing that sticks with me is like reading that, because like I said, I recommend anyone reading the book, because when you're reading it, you kind of feel like you're in that cell with you, you know, like with the way that you describe it. And I was really, you know, getting drawn into it and thinking, fuck it, oh, this is horrendous. But if any of those guys had found out that you were a cop, like you literally could have
toast.
That could have lost your life. You could have lost your life.
I would have been toast. Yeah, that would have been it. When Armley, which is the prison in Leeds, they didn't know. But sorry, I think no. Let me get me. It's such a long time ago. I think they did know because it was on the local news. So I was locked up in a cell by myself and kept locked down for my own protection.
And then they found out the day before you left. I think it was like you were.
That's it.
You ended up getting moved, but they just found out before you left. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. And so I was getting food tampering and threats, and so the prison locked me down as what they described, not in any way that politics comes into it, but as a political prisoner, basically, that needed protection. But that protection could only go so far, because just because I'm a police officer, as I still was, doesn't give me any more rights than any other prisoner. So the prison service has to be really careful that I don't get favourable treatment, otherwise the whole prison will erupt. So I was exposed to other inmates to a certain degree, but generally locked down in a cell in the hospital wing. But then I got transferred down south because it was causing a problem at Armley, because people were trying to get to me and cause me problems. So I went down to the south coast, where I was mixing with some quite high profile prisoners that were coming to the end of the sentence in open prisons, and that might have done 16, 17, 20 years in prison and just coming to the end of long sentences for things, anything right up to murder. Yeah. And because I was a Yorkshire bloke with a Yorkshire accent going down south, first time offence, common assault, prison, being moved to an open prison 250 miles away. They're not daft. So they worked out there was something wrong with me. So I whilst nobody ever actually fronted me up, apart from one guy who was actually all right, and he was out of the way of the rest of the prisoners, and he was a white collar prisoner that had been locked up for a fraud.
Yeah. So that's the guy that you were with in that first few days
initially. Yeah. So he knew, and he was decent. He said, "I'm not going to let anybody know." He had a privileged position within the prison, which meant that he found things out about prisoners, which he knew about me. He said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to tell anybody, because you will get killed if they find out in here that you're a cop." Because obviously in an open not obviously, people may not know this, but in an open prison, your doors are not locked. You are literally free to open the door and walk out. The consequences for doing so mean a very stiff sentence when you're recaptured. So people generally don't do that. Yeah. But it's also to test the trust and as they integrate you back in society. Now, obviously, I wasn't a threat to society, which is why I got put there. But the downside for me was, as I found that being in an open prison, they could come into my cell anytime they wanted, and and you know, do whatever they wanted to do. So that was as it was. And I think they knew. I think they kind of knew there was something, but didn't really know what it was. So my story down there was that I'd been in a pub fight. Some guy had aggravated me, and I just lost my temper, and I punched him in the face. And because of the seriousness of it, I got a custodial sentence. But I don't know whether they really believe that, because you don't go to prison for common assault in the UK unless you're me.
Yeah. Pardon me. So obviously then you come out of prison, you eventually, I mean, you had a bit of a rough time sort of dealing with things, like I guess you would. But then you end up doing the, pardon me, you end up doing the working at Premier Training, which is where we met.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, I would have done, I think it might have been, I said 06, 07, but it would have been 05, 06 when I was there, because I met, I started seeing Kate when I was in 2003.
Right.
And then the year after we got together, so the 2004 is when, that's when I lost all the weight. Because before we met, I was like 115 kilos at one point, and then I'd changed my whole lifestyle, went from 115 down to like, I think it was like down to 78 at one point. But then through, sorry?
Amazing.
Yeah, but then I was like skinny fat because I wasn't training. I just changed my diet because I had the worst diet. Like I would literally have like a large pizza with extra cheese and a large garlic bread and a tub of ice cream and a bottle of soda just on a Wednesday night, not for a special occasion. That was just, I used to eat like shit. And then I completely changed it, like literally overnight, and in 3.5 months dropped all that weight. And then in the January, so it would have been January 2004. Yeah, it would have been 05 when we met, because it would have been the January 04. We went on holiday to the Dominican Republic, and I remember just being like depressed, even though I'd lost all this weight. I looked like I got cancer because I'd lost so much weight so quickly. And then I started getting into training, and the following January I started the course. So that would have been it would have been then. So yeah, that's when we would have met. And then so you did the sports massage part of it, and what was it? Alan, weren't it, the guy that did the PT?
Alan, it was, yeah.
Do you still speak to him?
No, because I left Premier Training in 2009, and then I went into other roles. They changed the course around a bit, and they focused on the personal training element. So the sports therapy and sports massage became more of an online course. So I still had a job, and I was able to teach the personal training element, but that wasn't my real passion. Was the sports therapy. So I'd done 7 years there. And at that point, I kind of made the decision to take a bit of a career change, and I think had they not done that, I'd probably stayed there, because I look back on that job and I absolutely loved it. Again, going back to right at the beginning of this conversation, never thought I'd end up doing FE lecturing in sports injuries, but I did, and I really enjoyed that. And meeting people like you, Paul, and others, see them come through the course and become qualified, and putting that down to, you know, their efforts and their endeavours primarily, but also partly down to the teaching. A great deal of satisfaction. I really enjoyed that. So perhaps wouldn't have stopped had they not changed the course around. It was all to do with the FE funding structures that they had to change it. But yeah, I had 2002 to 2009 in the company, and I moved from Manchester in 2005 over to Leeds, which is where we met.
Yeah. Right. And so now, is it Rachel, your missus?
Yes, yeah. So Rachel and I met probably just before, because we met at Manchester. So that would have been just before. So 2004, 2005-ish, so about 20 years ago that Rachel. So I'll have been with Rachel when I was teaching you, Paul. Yeah.
And you
we're
got
still together.
Have you got is it 2 boys you've got?
One boy.
One boy. All right.
Yeah.
And how old's he now?
He's 8. I started late in life.
Oh, you did start late. Jesus Christ. Yeah. My girls are 12 and 11.
Are they?
Yeah, she's 13 in June. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? When you have kids, it completely changes everything.
It certainly does.
Yeah. Wow. Well, mate, it's been great to catch up. I mean, your story, like I said, I think, can we put a link in the? Yeah, we'll try and link to the book just so anyone that's interested can pick it up. Yeah, it's I just want to say thanks for coming on and sharing your story. It's the probably most horrific tale that we've had on, but
it's ongoing, Paul. If I could just finish by saying, I am in a legal process at the moment to get to the Court of Appeal again, and I've got a really strong legal team. I'm more optimistic than I've ever been, and if anybody is interested, I would firstly say thank you for your interest. It's very humbling. My website as well, www.afaircop.co.uk, will give. There's a miscarriages of justice page on there, and I intend to update that once I've got some substantive news on the appeal, so people can see that. But I'd like to thank you, Paul, for your interest. It's really humbling after all this time to speak about it again, and for your support.
Well, it's so random how it all came about, because Ben, who was on a few weeks ago, anyway. I mean, check his episode out if you get a chance. But he was a cop. He was a tactical cop in the Northern Territory, and he just said something about, you've always got to be mindful you don't go too far, because. And I said, oh, I actually know someone who did that, and and to be honest, I couldn't even remember your name at the time. I'm like, oh, like just in the moment. And it was only after the episode, I'm like, because Ben said to me, "Is the book any good?" I went, I don't know. I said, I know it came out, but like life just goes on. And then I just went down. I think I went on Amazon and I saw it, and then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole and ended up on your website that you just mentioned, and then I just sent off an email thinking, oh, I'll never hear anything. The next day you replied, and that's how we ended up talking now.
Great. Well,
yeah, incredible.
It is. It's great, and it's nice to speak to you. It's you've got your own story, Paul, one that I admire.
Oh, thanks, mate. Well, yeah, it's ongoing, like yours. But
that's live.
That is live. Well, if you get when the other book comes out, let's certainly let me know so I can read that, and maybe we'll do this again.
Sure, it'd be a pleasure.
Okay, pal.
Thanks, Paul. Really nice to see you again, albeit virtually. Take care, bud. I'll speak to you again soon, hopefully.
Nice one. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate. All the best. Bye. Bye.
This is When I Grow Up with Paul Glazby.